This will be the review video for while loops. I forgot which uh, meeting this is, like the sixth or something, but for some of you guys, we went over while loops last week, and there's just a few of you, so this week we went over them again. Hopefully you have a better grasp, those of you who did it twice. But this is a review video anyway, because I know you will forget a lot of stuff over the break, and it's really important. This is a really important concept, introducing concept of loops. Loops are used when you want to iterate through a certain set of commands multiple times. This is very essential to programming. As you'll soon see, the amount of applications that use loops is tremendous. So, let's just get started with while loops, which are the basic form of a loop. You'll learn for loops later, and there's also the do while. But we'll just focus on while loops for this lesson. And the way it works is you declare, this is the declaration. There we go. So, while, just like an if statement, right? You don't have to have you can have a space if you want, but I like to do this. Well, actually, let's do a space. While some condition, okay? Now, the reason why we did if statements before this is because in if statements, what we were having in the if, we were having some sort of Boolean expression. What is a Boolean expression? It's an expression that returns true or false. So, what is a Boolean expression? Give me some examples. So we could have x is greater than 1. We could have x is less than 1 or whatever. Also, we could have we can complicate things and say, well, if x is less than 1 and y is greater than 7, okay, all those are Boolean expressions, okay. And note that the and, the only thing the and does is it takes two statements. Say if this is true, this is false. It takes two Boolean results, either true or false, and it tells whether those two combined make a true or a false. Now note, so in this case it would return false, because true and false returns false. They both need to be true. So some of you were wondering why at the meeting we couldn't do something like x is less than 1 is that, or something like 1 is less than x is less than 7. Okay, so the way the computer reads this is not all in one. It reads it one at a time. So it's going to read one operator at a time. So it's going to go 1 is less than x. Okay, is that true? That is true. Okay, now it's going to read true is less than 7. That is not a Boolean expression. The only thing you can do with trues is ands and ors. Or nots, right? So be careful with this stuff. You'd have to do, well, 1 is less than x and x is less than 7. You'd have to do that. And it could be a little tedious, but you just have to do that. Okay, but back to our discussion on while loops. We need, just like an if statement, the condition in here to be true in order to enter the while loop. Okay, so get rid of this. In this case, in the presentation, we said while x is less than 10. Alright, sure, let's try that. This is all you really need for a while loop. Please make your brackets on separate lines. Do not do this, because I know you guys, and you will you will start coding outside of the brackets and it'll just be chaos. So please do this. It's very neat, and in NetBeans you'll have it highlighted. So while x is less than 10, alright, cool. That's really all you need for a while loop. All this extra stuff is to make x. First of all, you have to declare what x is, and you have to make it so this is not an infinite loop. You have to make it so it returns false at some point. And the way we did that, just as an example, is we first initialized x to be 0. And, oh, another really important thing. Please don't put a semicolon. I know you're supposed to put a semicolon after every line. Please don't, because anything that has like an if statement or while loop that has parentheses, any sort of function, for loop, when you get into method headers, all those stuff, anything that will have a bracket and that has brackets associated with it, those do not have semicolon. Like, take a look at this. Public class, no semicolon because it's brackets. Main, no semicolon because it's brackets. Package does because it doesn't have brackets. So just keep that in mind. So, and if you do put a semicolon, this is actually kind of dangerous because the compiler won't recognize it as an error. There will be no syntax error. Because what you're basically saying is, for those of you who don't know, if you don't have brackets, it's not necessarily an error if you only have one line of code after it. It'll just read the only one code and only do that one line of code inside the while loop. So by doing a semicolon, you basically said do nothing. So there's no syntax error, it just means like the while loop does nothing. And that's not good. You don't want it to just do nothing. That's why some of you were running into errors. So, no semicolon, put the brackets. And okay, so we have x is equal to 0. So what do we have to do to x to make it, this eventually proves false? Because right now this proves true, right? 0 is less than 10, so it's going to keep going in. And if we do nothing, say we just print out, let's say we just print out x, cool. But what's it going to print out? It's going to print out zeros infinitely, and you're going to have an infinite loop. Okay, it's never going to end. That is not good. So what do you have to do if you want maybe print out x? We're going to do something a little different than what's in here. We're going to put the print line statement inside the loop. And we're going to say, very importantly, what's going to change about x? Well, we're going to say x plus plus. Okay, remember plus plus is equivalent to saying x equals x plus 1. Whoops. Now, at this point, I should also note something important. You can do this, where you say, well, okay, here's the thing. Don't do this. Okay, int x plus plus. Because remember, you can't declare one variable multiple times. Declaration, remember, if you don't know that term, that means that you're specifying the type. You only specify that once. Okay. Now what you could do is this, and x equals 0 inside the loop. But then be careful, because if you want to use x out, say if you want to system that out, print line x, okay, well, it should print out 10, right? Because that was the last thing that x would have taken on before it exited the loop. Well, it's not going to know what x is because you declared x inside the loop, and x would be what you call a local variable. Now, we'll go into this more later, but just be careful. Try to do it as I do. We'll talk about local variables and global variables later, but just know that it won't know what x is because you declared it inside these brackets. Okay. So let's do it outside. X is okay, so we're gonna do x plus plus, not declare it again. And so what will this print? If you are unsure, just test yourself, pause it. But let me give you the answer. So it's gonna print 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and will it print 10? Well, let's see. If x is 9, okay, or let's say x is 8, so just print it 8. Okay, x plus plus, okay, now goes inside. Okay, print out 9. Plus plus 10. Is 10 less than 10? No, it's not, so it's going to exit the loop. So it's not going to actually print 10. If you want to print 10, you can do less than or equal to, or you can do less than 11. So yeah. And if you wanted to like start it at 1, that's fine. So you could play around with this, okay? But this was just an example of iterating through numbers, which is really common and what you'll do a lot in for loops. Now, as we'll see in the next slide, you don't always need to use while loops in this way. There's actually a really good application for it. So we talked about the counter variable. Minus minus decrements, increments and decrements. That means increasing by 1 or decreasing 1. This is basically the code that we did. And actually, I'll probably start using I more, because I is the more common counter variable. And then these are the steps, right? I'm sure you can review that later. Okay. I wanted to get to this. So there's a more there's another application to using while loops, and it's not necessarily just iterating through a certain number of times as indicated by x, right? This is like you know how many times you want to iterate through. This would be I want to iterate through 10 times from 0 to 9, and it's cool, right? Well, this application with scanner is very interesting because, and this is one of the things that only while loops can do and not for loops, is you're just going to say, well, I don't really know how many times I'm going to be iterating through. I just want to make sure that it stops at this condition. Okay, so to do this, let's introduce the has next int. Now, our goal, I should note, let's put the goal at the top, right? Because you've been using scanner a lot, and you've had to complete, you'd have to keep running the input, keep running the program to get new inputs. Well, our goal is to get as many inputs from user as user would like in this. I don't want to make it go too far. Okay, so we don't know how many inputs the user is going to do, but we want to get as many inputs from them as they would like. And in real time, maybe we can be executing the program and then it's going to ask for another one instead of just terminating the program. Alright, so how do we do that? Well, there's a method. Okay, remember, methods have these parentheses, and they have camel case, so this is lowercase, but these are both uppercase. And this method, what does it return? It returns, it is a Boolean value, okay? Now, this looks very similar to nextInt. Okay, what does nextInt return? It returns an integer, whatever the user inputted, okay? But has nextInt turns true or false, okay? As would be self-explanatory, it checks whether the user has inputted a nextInt. It doesn't necessarily return that integer, it just checks whether that was an integer, okay? So how do you use it? Remember, all methods are called on objects. What object do you call this on? Well, it's of object of type scanner. Let's call the scanner in, because I like to do that. And so I don't confuse you, let's just declare it. Pretend we imported scanner, okay? So we've imported scanner already. Scanner in equals new scanner system. Please memorize this. Either that or just write it down in your notebook, because we really can't spend more time going over this. I know it's not necessarily intuitive, but it's really important that you just memorize this. Again, you have the type, you have the name. This can be called anything, right? I'm going to call it in. Equals, okay, and new to construct it. Okay, whenever constructing any object, you use new. And then you do the type again, and then it's going to have its construction parameter. And in this case, you want it to take input from the user, so you say system.in. You could also say file, okay, but we're not going to use inputting from files. We're going to use inputs from the user. That's, system. That's called system.in. Now, I should note, for confusion purposes, this is always going to be system.in. If this has nothing, that in has nothing to do with this in. This could be scanner out equals new scanner system.in. So this is always going to be in. Just don't want to confuse you. Okay, so how's nextInt? Okay, methods have to be called on an object, and specifically the object reference, meaning the object variable name. Okay, this is the object reference. So we're going to say, what are we going to say? Hit yourself, it is in dot has nextInt. Okay, this is going to return a value. Okay, now, if this is going to say this returns true, well, how are we going to use this? We're going to put this in a while loop. So we're going to say, wow, in.dot has next int. Cool. Okay. I'm going to say, well, that's true. System.in. Line has next int. I'm going to use some stuff. Oops, do all right here. Leave scanner. In.dot has next int. And actually, I think we'll go to NetBeans and do this. But while we have input has next int, we're going to do some stuff. Let's look at the presentation before we go to NetBeans and make sure we understand this. So, by the way, I sort of broke the rule here and put brackets just for space reasons, and I put a semicolon, which illustrates what happens if you just put a semicolon there. Means you just do nothing. This is a do whatever. If it is not an integer, it will enter the loop. If not, it will not enter the loop. So our goal is to, if we say 1, 2, 3, we're going to like print out something, and then if you say Q, then it's going to stop. That's our goal. And notice it's not going to give us an error, because it'll just exit the loop and end. It'll just go down here. Okay, it's not going to have a compiler error or runtime error. It's just going to go outside the loop. So this is what we're going to hope to code, and let's look at that here and pretend I didn't do this yet. Okay, so look, we imported scanner. Okay, make sure you memorize how to do this. We're gonna do that, and we have inside the while loop. So what's important to remember when doing something like this is you probably not run into this problem except in this exercise, and I actually ran into it. Is you have to actually assign. Yeah, you actually have to assign the input to an integer. I'm not sure why, and this is something that I learned when looking at some of your programs. In all normal cases, you would do this anyway, just because of any application would require this. But for this specific exercise, I wasn't planning to do this statement because you're not going to do anything with input. But just note that if you don't put this line in here, the computer will not do what it's supposed to do. I don't know. So make sure you put that in there, and then just say system print line. We want to print. Let's just hi. Okay, so we have a semicolon. And what this will do is every time it enters the loop, it's going to print out hi, and it's going to only enter the loop if we inputted an integer. Alright, so let's test this. And we have to type down here. So hi, yay. Good. And then if I say you, it's going to just end because it didn't enter the loop. It went from here, this line, to this line. Just skipped all this. So if you need to study that closer, you can, but I'm going to go on. And let's see. Okay, so most of you didn't get through this last week, and so I'll demonstrate it right now, and then we'll see how much you remember in January when you come back, because we'll also do this exercise. So, what is our goal? Always understand the problem before you start coding. Very important, and part of that is pseudocode, which I've actually written for you. Yay! Okay, use it. Please use it. Write a program that takes in any number of integers. That sounds like we have to use a in.has has next int while with a while. Okay. Alright. So that takes in any number of integers from the user. Okay. And to end the input, you're going to type a non-integer, so q or whatever for quit, and print the greatest of this integer. So the goal is to find greatest of user inputs. Okay. So let's think about how we're going to do this. We're not going to actually print out anything inside the while loop. Okay, because if you do that, you don't know what's the greatest yet until you do the while loop, and you get all of those values, right? So this says well enough has next int, set input to next int, okay, set greatest, okay, and then you have to set greatest to value of input. There's actually a sixth step here that says print out the greatest at the end, but that's going to be outside the loop. So first of all, what do we have to do? Well, we have to notice that we have this like method here, right? These have these methods, and we have something that it's being called on. It's called on in. Now we use from our deduction skills that in is of type scanner, which means that we have to declare a scanner. Implicitly, this tells you that we have to declare a scanner. I'm not gonna future lessons. I'm not gonna say every single thing that you have to do, but know that if you're taking in integers, you're gonna have to do that import, and then you're gonna have to do that declaration. So let's see. Do we still have it up? We have the import, okay, and we have the declaration, and one thing you guys can do is just reuse your code. Really, like reuse scanner code to save it when you do it, and it'll be a lot faster. You should know how to do it, but for sakes of learning new things, we're just gonna reuse this. Okay. So looks like we did actually a lot of steps already. While not has next int, so set input to not has to next int. We'll do that. And input equals in next int. No, it's not has next int. It's next int. And we're gonna set that. And okay, now we're gonna set greatest to the value of input. Okay. Now let's think of why we're doing this. Let's before we do any of this, I gave you this algorithm, but pretend I didn't. Okay. Let's do some well, no, we can move it over here. And let's decrease this. There we go. Alright, here we go. Let's do some algorithm. Okay? This is how we develop our algorithm. Okay? So what we're going to do is pretend we have the inputs 4, 6 to 9, 10. Okay? No, we'll just keep it simple. Let's not do 10. Alright. So we want to, once we take these all, and we're going to, there's actually multiple ways to do this. And what I'm going to say is you do not have to declare multiple variables for all these things. Okay? What we could do is we could go to the while loop, okay, and then declare, actually it would be very hard to do that. Okay, so actually in a while loop we can't declare these, we can't assign these to different variables. We'd have to use if statements. So let me just demonstrate what I'm talking about. While while in dot has next int. Okay. If we start trying to code this, and then we say, well, int input 1 equals in dot next int, right? Well, there's a problem because every time we enter the loop, it's only going to input 1. Well, how do we specify, like, if it's input 2, right? How do we specify if it's... Now, what we could do is we could be like, okay, int counter equals 0, or equals 1, and then we say, well, if counter equals 1, then input, then if counter equals 2. Okay, that's just complicated, okay? We could do that, okay? And then we have to do counter plus plus at the end of this. You guys might be confused, but we have to do this, then we have to say if counter equals 1, then we're going to do this, else if, and it just gets terrible, right? So we're not going to do that, okay? What we're going to do is think about what we actually need. What are the variables that we actually need to store here? Well, we need to store the greatest, okay? and we need to store the current input. Okay. Now, we only need to store those because we're looking at this one at a time. We need to, only thing we care about is whether the current input is greater than the greatest. Okay? It's the only thing we care about. So, now thinking of it through this lens, okay, we're going to go and, let's code here. Okay, int input equals int.nextInt. Alright, then we're going to say if input is greater than greatest, okay, then we're going to put our brackets, okay, and notice it's nicely indented for you. NetBeans will do that. Some of you were doing some weird thing where you had your brackets here and then like whatever. That's not going to help you like try to make it organized with the tabs. Okay, NetBeans is not going to recognize that as tabs. So make sure if it's not like this, please make it like this, nice and organized, where you have this indents where you can really see what's going on. So int, if input is greater than greatest, then we're going to say, well, greatest equals input. Okay. Now here's the thing, we have an error. Okay, because it doesn't actually know what greatest is. See, cannot find symbol variable greatest. So, well, alright. Why don't we set it? What does Visual Code say? Say greatest the value of input. Okay. And why are we doing that? Well, because if we just say greatest equals like -1, well, maybe all the inputs are negative, so we don't know what the range is of what we're dealing with. So we're just gonna say greatest equals, or we're gonna do this after this, right? Equals input. Okay. Cannot fill in. It's because we oh yeah, we have to say int greatest equals input. So we declared it. Now there is a problem here, and I'll say right now, the problem is with local variables with scope, what we call scope in programming, and that is greatest is a local variable, meaning we can't actually reference it outside of this while loop. Okay. Some of you are like, oh no. So what if we say system, because this is what we want to do, right? Print line. Sometimes coding is like this, you skip around, right? We want to eventually print out greatest. Now, cannot find symbol. Why? Because this has been declared inside the while loop. Okay, so how do we fix this problem? Okay, well, what we have to do is we have to put greatest outside here. Okay, and we'll just not initialize it. We'll just say in greatest. It's some compilers will not like it, but it shouldn't give you an error if you do that. And instead of saying int greatest now, we're just gonna say greatest. Okay. Yay. That looks good. So now what we did is we said greatest equals input, meaning input's value has now been assigned to greatest. Okay. So let's go through our thing here and trace our code. So if it's 4, okay, greatest is going to be 4, input's 4, okay, and then we're going to go to the loop again. Now input's not greater than greatest because input equals greatest, so it's not going to go in the loop. Okay, then it's going to go again, and 6. Okay, so now 6 is input, is greatest equals input. That is a mistake. Because now that greatest, and I'm just tracing the code so so this is what you guys need to do, because I know a lot of you have errors when you code and you want to give up or whatever, but you got to trace it like this. So we just said greatest equals input. We want that to be just a one-time thing. Now I didn't actually specify this in the pseudocode, so sorry about that, but this is why I'm demonstrating right now. Okay, greatest equals input has to be outside here. And greatest, see, now the brackets are all messed up. And greatest equals input. Okay, so that's how to do it. Now, the problem now is, well, what is input? So, meaning this line actually has to be outside here. Okay? Which means that you're assuming that the user is going to input at least one integer when you do this. fine. Okay, it's a comfortable assumption. So we're actually going to call the first one outside of it. And well, that actually needs to be before this. Okay. Notice control cut is very useful in programming. And here, because we use input again, we need to declare it again. So int. And I'm not going to say, well, we could use input again, I suppose. Notice that if we say int input again, it's not going to like it because we already used input here. So we'll just say input again. Input equals in dot next int. Because notice that next int needs to be called multiple times because it only gets the next one. Okay. So now let's trace our code. Okay. So 4. So input equals next. So 4 is input. Greatest equals 4. Okay. Now say we enter 6, so then it's going to say yes, we have entered a next int. It's going to go in the while loop. Int input equals int.next int. So it's going to equal that 6 now. That's the input. Okay. Before it just checked, now it's going to actually equal it in this line. Okay, now we're going to go through the if statement. Let's close that gap. If input is greater than greatest. So input is 6 is greater than it was 4, so it's gonna go in the if statement, and we're gonna set greatest equal to 6, which is the input. Okay, yay! So it works. It looks like it works, and we're gonna just go to this line. So notice we're not repeating this stuff. We're only repeating stuff inside the while loop. So it's gonna keep looping down until we enter something like Q, and then it's gonna be while in has next int. Nope, and then it's gonna go down and print greatest. So notice how we just kind of debugged that by going through, talking about local variables, talking about what needs to go inside and outside the loop. And something that you can do to help you is make a trace table. Okay, so we're gonna have greatest, okay, and then we're gonna have like input, okay. And let's bring this up. Okay, so greatest is starting out to be 4, right? Input starting out to be 4. Okay, then what's next? Then while it is inside, so it's not going to go in, then it's going to, input is going to be 6, right? Okay. Now, is 6 greater than 4? Yes, it is. So now greatest is going to be 6. Okay. And you just trace this way. It's actually better to do it in the table, but I can't do that in Notepad. So you just trace this way and go through and label them, and get out a piece of paper and just go through and trace your code. And we'll do more practice of that in the class. But anyway, hope this video was helpful. Hopefully it wasn't too long. Please have an excellent winter break if you're watching this beforehand. If you're watching this afterwards, then, well, happy New Year. And that is, I believe, all I wanted to cover. Let's go, what was next? Next week we're looking at for loops, and that's basically does all the things that we did with the counter variable inside one statement. So thank you for watching, and bye-bye.